PowerPoint. You guys need to know I want to make sure I tailor it to what you need, so please ask questions at any time. Don't feel like you're interrupting me, and you'll see that I'm quite animated, and just interrupt me. It's all good. I'm not offended at all. All right, so basics behind Cornell note-taking. I think we've all experienced note-taking at some point and in some form in our lives, whether even if it was just from our high school experience. But the idea behind Cornell Notes is it's not just about getting the information on paper, it's about mastering that information, and that's the leap that we're trying to make with these kiddos. And I will walk you through the steps that we're intentionally showing them and how you can help support those steps at home as well. The materials, it's obviously sequentially efficient. I love all those words. You know, for me being a concrete thinker, I'm like, this makes me my happy place. It's all sequential. Cornell note paper is something that the kids, some of the kids have access to, but we do teach them how to do it with just loose leaf paper. So to make your life easy, I'm actually going to share a couple pieces of what Cornell paper looks like. There are actually notebooks that come with Cornell paper now, which is so supportive for this, but then this way you guys can have a look-see as to how that's formatted. So when we talk about Cornell note-taking, it looks like this. We're going to practice. I encourage you to take some notes if you want as you go, just because it'll be a great way to look, even if it's to label out what we do. So we do teach the kids, the students, how to draw it on their own paper. It's about a 2.5-inch column, skinny column. We always teach them to label their headings. I know that this sounds really elementary, but at the same time, the whole concept of having their name and date on every single piece of paper that they touch is quite hard for middle schoolers. So we really try to reinforce that moment of, is this piece of paper dated? Is this piece of paper dated? Is this piece of paper dated? Really broken record by the end of the day. They're like, wow, Miss Campbell, my pieces of paper are dated. I'm like, no, they're not. Otherwise I wouldn't have to say this anymore. So we're really trying to drive that home. And again, it's a pre-college function of when you get a professor, a college professor, or even a high school teacher who's like, okay, we've got a test in a week. And it's going to be over the materials from November 3rd to November 20th. And then the child opens up their stuff and they're like, wow, I don't know what those are. That way that takes away the mystery. When they're taking notes in class, so even if a teacher doesn't per se give Cornell Notes in their classroom, all students can take Cornell Notes no matter how the information is being delivered. Because how we train them is in the taking phase of notes, they write everything that happens in class in that wide column. And so on the Cornell paper in front of you, that would be the wide column, the big column on the right. So even if a teacher is, putting like a PowerPoint up that's just basically outlines, well then they lay that outline out in the wide column. And they don't write anything really in that skinny column. Sometimes teachers will supplement information in their skinny, if they're giving Cornell Notes, sometimes they'll put like the heading for that information in the skinny column. However, I'm going to show you what the true purpose of that skinny column is after class, after the students are done taking the notes, and this is where your component will come in, where you can have some of those key phrases to be like, oh, well did you write some questions in your skinny column? Did you come up with some test questions to practice? And so this will actually take the place of flashcards for some of the kids too, and I'll show you how that will also work. The other piece of this is, and so if you look at all the components here, at the very bottom, there's a summary component. We always tell the students to not write the summary until that day is done. And that's where a 24-hour piece comes in. With the brain processing and repetitions, it always works much better for the brain to revisit that information on a kind of a scheduled basis. But by writing this summary, this is a really high-level thinking skill that pulls everything together. This isn't a reflection. There's a difference. It's not a reflection of what they know or don't know. It's simply a summary of that information that they learned about that day. And that simple task increases their retention rate by up to 30 to 40%. Just the summary, like not the other things I'm going to talk to you about, like just the summary increases their retention rate. So when we're talking about a test, I mean, wow, that's a huge, huge step for them. So when we're filling out the heading, if you want to fill out your heading, this is how some of the teachers present it, or the teachers will lay out and they'll say, my EQ or my learning target. So if you notice on the top of the Cornell paper, there's a place that's labeled essential question. I know that for sure every teacher in the building at a minimum, here you go, sweetie, at a minimum puts up the learning target. And the kids can change it into a question, or they can just write that learning target down. But it gives them that written reference of, why am I doing this? Why am I learning this information? I think we try to teach them to be much better thinkers about their learning. How are Cornell Notes used as an effective study tool at home is the essential question we're going to focus on. So how do we, like, okay, so your kids are doing this in school, that's great. So what? How can I support them at home? So during the lecture, this is what the students fill in, okay? That's where they live, is just in that section. There are teachers who do bounce to other sections, but for that section, why we take them, obviously so they can use their notes on outside of class, stimulates critical thinking. The higher recall through repetition, you're gonna hear me talk about repetition a lot. Cornell Notes builds in your way of repetition. Did anybody recopy their notes when they were younger? Like, you'd take your notes and then you'd lay out a whole nother piece of paper and you'd write them all again. I would have loved to have Cornell Notes in college, just because I'd be like, wow, I have so much more time on my hands. I don't know that my parents would have loved that, but it was the idea that this should be your study tool, and to be able to bring that together for them. So I do have a little research clip. It's about a 3-minute little quick video that I would like to share with you guys about what goes behind our research. Thank you for your patience. Oh, except
Ebenhaus, well, he was a researcher in the late 1800s, 1886 to be exact, who actually started doing research studies on the ideas and concepts of forgetting and how we remember. And what he found was that on the very first day that you start to learn new information, you obtain 100% of that information, and it's just gelling in that short-term memory. And then what happens on the second day, or within 24 hours later, you're actually losing, if you don't go back to revisit that information, 50 to 80% of that information. Now, I think that it's actually between pass and go, because you have to think about who's going out with who, what text did I get, or what am I going to do this weekend? But that's just me. He also found that as the days go on, you lose more and more of that information. So what's the best way to overcome this? Well, that's to actually follow the 10-24-7 model. And that is that repeating the information within 10 minutes, paraphrasing it so that the information gets into the long-term memory, and then 24 hours later, then you come back and revisit the information for at least 10 minutes so that it's really gelled in there. And then 7 days later, typically when we give another quiz or a test, when we ask students, do you remember what we did last week? You don't get, no. But then you get, oh yeah, I remember, here it is. And you study the information and you revisit the information for about 5 minutes or so. So in following that, you keep that nice equilibrium of at least 90 to 100% of the information within the 7th day and the 30th day. We also are going to look at Dr. Walter Pock's research. Now he's the one who actually created Cornell Notes in 1949. And what he did was, he was actually frustrated as to why some of the students were getting C's, D's, F's at Cornell University. And what he found was that students who took no notes whatsoever retained less than 59% of the information. What grade does that give you? An F. He found that if you took some notes, fragmented, gaps, you couldn't understand your writing, how much information do you think they retained? Approximately 59%. Again, what grade does that give you? An F. But if you took copious notes, went back, reviewed your notes, had questions to the left, a summary reflection at the end, and went back and revisited and filled out any gaps, how much information do you think you retained? 90 to 100%. What grade does that give you? An A. So back to your question as to why do we have to take these notes? Which grade do you want? F, F, or A? Use the videos, information, and resources found here to learn focused note-taking using Cornell Notes.
Sorry.
10-24/7 model. The concept that if a child, or if anybody, when you're taking in new information, revisits that information within the first 10 minutes, that already kind of re-ups that information level. And then within 24 hours, revisiting it again for only 5 minutes, re-ups it to that original level. And then within the week, doing it again. I strongly recommend to students that they do it every other day, that they look at their notes on the same day that they're having that class. So when they come home with their A-day stuff, they pull those notes out, and even if it's the notes from just that unit, just to go through them and be like, oh, I'm gonna read my questions, or oh, I'm gonna go through and highlight stuff, or I'm gonna go through and circle some stuff. And I have some ideas for some specific revisions, but by doing that, it just re-triggers that learning just a little bit more so that it amps it up for them. Now, I do need to give you a heads up. Yes?
Quick question, so if, before they go to that class, do you suggest they do it in between their walking, or do you say like take it like 10 minutes or 15 minutes every morning and go through all those classes?
Either way, either in the morning, or if they do whatever their homework study pattern is at night, you know, especially if students are coming home and they're like, oh no, I don't have any homework tonight. Oh no, pull out those notes from today. Let's just like set the timer for 15 minutes and let's see how far you get. You know, it is that repetition, so wherever it fits into their day. A lot of teachers build in what's called the 10-2 model, meaning that if we're giving out new information, we do it in a 10-minute chunk. So it already fits that 10-minute revisit time, because then we give them in a 10-minute chunk, and then they have 2 minutes to process with their elbow partner, or maybe the teacher has like a quick refresh activity or something else, so they're already re-upping that material within that 10 minutes. So we've built that into their time. But then it's that within that 24 hours for them to take a look at it again, you know, so looking at it that night.
Before they go to that class?
Yeah, before they go to that class. So even in the morning, like you said, if they're getting their day set up, like it depends on where their effective study time happens. If you've got an effective studier who's better at night, do it at night. If you've got an effective studier in the morning, grab it in the morning, you know, just to bring that to their brain. So this was the forgetting curve that they talked about. So this is the traditional input of information. So we take in something, great, it's there, and wow, it's gone. And that's why at Cornell University they were saying, why are all these law students who are supposed to be these amazing, brilliant people all getting Fs on these tests? Well, because they were doing a really good job looking like students in class and then never touching the material again. And as a middle schooler, they are learning how to play the game. They know how to look like a student in class, and they know, and I'm not saying that there are no bad students. If they know how to do the information they need to do and to process it. I feel like we need to coach them and guide them into how do you continue to bring that information back to the front of your brain, especially when their brain is so complex at this time of their lives anyway. So by that whole 10-24 model, so in 10 minutes, you know, we bring it back on that 24th day, but then it's just taking 20 minutes, then 5 minutes. So the research shows us if they just go back and review that 24 hours later for 10 minutes, and then come back in even within a week, and that's why I say every other day, and do it for 5 minutes. Okay, now we're getting ready for a test, and I don't know how many of your babes cram for tests. It hurts me when I watch my children study at home. And they live with 2 avid teachers, so it's not an option, so we don't do that anymore. But you know that whole moment where they pull out everything and like, I have a test and everything is stressful, you know. And I don't know if anybody else has experienced that. Yeah. When they're getting ready for that test, they're really only now spending 5 minutes of reviewing each of those sections of information instead of that whole night consumed because I have a social studies test tomorrow. You know, so it just kind of, it shifts that thinking. It's a hard shift sometimes for kids because they're like, oh no, I don't have to think about it until the test. No, think about it every day. All right, whoops, wrong way. Okay, so just an overview. So this is kind of where your kids live at school, like when they're setting up their information, fill out their heading, write out their essential questions, keeping whatever, and that's the other piece too. What I love about Cornell Notes, say you've got a kiddo who just loves to do outlines. Like I love concrete sequential outlines. They make me very happy. And I know I have students who are that way too. And they're just like, I love all my little spaces and it's all like, and I'm like, good, that's awesome. Stick it in this wide column. They can still put whatever they need to there. You know, if you have a student who it does like to write in word clouds, there are some, it works for them. We let them do that, okay? but those word clouds all live here in this space. So we do coach the students through this as far as during a lecture. This is going to go through what we want them to do. So in their notes, if you're seeing like complete sentences happen in their notes, talk about paraphrasing, talk about, skipping a line in between. I have some really good line drawers who will like fill up every line on the piece of paper and then strategically draw a line around the section of information that like fit. I'm like, oh, your brain is like throwing up in there. Like, you got to give it some white space. So we talk about the significance of putting the white space in there. I know that it's hard being a science teacher. I'm very environmentally aware. And then I make copies of note paper. I'm getting over it. I only get hives every once in a while, like when I put in for 500 pieces of paper to be copied of note paper. But the idea that they have enough space is really key to learning, and so this is not a place where we can serve. We want them to consume that paper so that that information can get fully processed. Abbreviations, phrases, these are all components that we as teachers constantly cue them in as, So being in the positions that I'm in with my classes, I do have conversations with the kids where you're like, identify what my cues are. Tell me what those cues are when I say this is going to be on a test. Or if you have a teacher who, there are some teachers in the building, and learning the nuances of those teachers has been amazing. I mean, there are a couple teachers who will say things 3 times. And whatever that item is that they're saying 3 times, guaranteed it is showing up on that test. So even processing that component with them, asking them the question to be like, hey, what's your math teacher's cues? Like, how do you know that that's important information that you should write down? Do they walk up to the board and say, write this down? Or do they put a star on it on the whiteboard? Or, just to have them verbally identify those. And then I say to the kiddos, now do that in your notes. Like, if they're cueing you into that piece of information, then I should see like stars or fireworks or a happy face or something, an exclamation point around that information, so that when you're studying it and reviewing it, you know that it's going to be important and you know to come back to it. Obviously, pictures, diagrams. How many of your kiddos are pretty visual? Like, they love the look of stuff, right? They enjoy, it's not a bad thing do you guys remember colored gel pens when they came out? It was like in heaven. Like, colored gel pens are so cool, and you needed one of every color. It's okay. Awesome. The brain is awesome about processing color and processing information with color, and that's not a bad thing to have them wrap back in. Writing in yellow, probably not effective. Just gonna throw that out there. About the time one of my little 6th graders is using a highlighter to take notes. I'm like, oh buddy, give me that. Try a pencil. Like, there's obviously limits, but we work with what we got. All right. Go back. There we go. All right, so now after the lesson, this is where, outside, what they should do with their notes. Like, what do we want them working on with their notes? Highlighting. Going back in and touching it again. Looking at, crossing out non-essential. How many times do we write down things we don't need to know? Because you're in the moment of, I'm going to take some good notes. Like, I'm going to make this look awesome. Because my teacher's talking. I'm going to write things down. I have no idea what they're saying, but I'm going to write it down. And that's okay. We talk about all, and then the kids are like, oh, I'll just erase it. I'm like, no, leave it there, but cross it off, because by that physical action, your brain actually eliminates that connection to that information. And they're like, oh. Now I'm saying this about the physical connection of crossing them off. You do need to know, we have incredibly successful electronic Cornell note takers, where they interact with their notes on a Cornell frame on their computer screen. They can still go in and add color. They can still put stars in. They move stuff around. I have one student who will hyperlink information or definitions to words that she's struggling with. So all of a sudden I'll see the blue underline in her thing. I'm like, why? What is this? She's like, well, I didn't know the definition, so I looked it up and I linked it. Good girl. Way to go. Like, that's what we want, I didn't think of that, it wasn't. So now I'm waiting for the next moment where the video pops up, where you get the little interactive, where you're like, ooh, and here's the experiment in action. Okay, That sounds great. We just keep shooting for the stars, right? Supplementing information with text. Inviting the students to go back to that text component that's been assigned. They've been assigned to read something out of the textbook. Well, our students are very good at reading, at doing their assignments, at reading the text. But what did they do with that information? Well, now link it to what we've been doing in class. Put some more in there. And that's, again, why that white space is so important, so there's room to add those diagrams and to add that extra information, so they have it around them. What I'm sharing with you is a color copy of some notes that have been revised for language arts and math. And I just want you to kind of take a look at what those revisions look like. So just in the wide column, that's where I'm talking about these things going. To be able to go back in. Now, I always encourage kids to switch pen colors. So when they're going to go back to their notes the next time, don't go back and use that black pen again. Go back and use a red pen or whatever to fill in that information, because again, that your brain is making those physical connections. The other part too that we really, I think, sometimes forget to encourage them to do, they are such social creatures. Why do we deny them? Right? So let's let them be their social creatures and be like, hey, did you get together and compare your notes from class today? And even if they're in different sections with the same teacher, it's amazing what they can share out with each other. And by building in those pieces, the students are like, one, they're talking about it. They think they're getting to have social time. And they're looking at their notes again, which means another repetition. And before you know it, we've got 5 repetitions, and they haven't even come close to studying for a test yet. So it kind of creates that fail-safe that they're doing it before they even know they're doing it. Hence why you're hearing at home, we hate this because they are aware that they're doing it, and they think that they're just, we're just going to go with it. So underlining key information, just to kind of recap. Now, the other part that we do is this skinny column. Some teachers incorporate time into class to fill this out. A lot of teachers do not. This is a great review piece because I always tell the kids that whatever they're going to put in that skinny column should look like test questions. So it's stuff that they are getting from their wide column that they would then use to study for the test. Because then, when it comes time to study, they just fold their piece of paper. And they now have their flashcards built into their notes. And all that information is there. Okay? Now, of course, that's why we talked about that other slide where you're building in all that information in the first place so that when you do this, it's effective. But again, it's a learning curve. So that's why we do these skinny column questions. And there's a whole nother class I can talk about writing effective questions. And we do that with the kiddos about levels of thinking. A low level is where they just can look up the answer. A higher level is something where they're applying it. It's connecting to previous learning. And that is something that all of us actively do with our students. You'll hear us all the time say higher order thinking questions or Costa's levels of thinking. And you can use those words at home and students will have heard them. I know that every single 6th grader in the building gets it. I know that every 9th grader in the building gets it. I know that all my AVID teachers in 7th and 8th grade also use all that terminology. So it's very much out there for the students to have in their vernacular, in their normal.
I guess, how many levels are there? So there's level 1.
Level 1 is book only, so definition. Level 2 is book and brain. So you've got the definition, but you kind of have to coax out the answer to that question. And then level 3 is all brain. It's taking all the other information that they know, but it's really synthesizing it or analyzing it into something else. It's transforming it into the next level. So when you're generating these great study questions, these are the ones I was just talking about. This is information that might appear on the test. So when the students are like, I didn't get a study guide for this class. I'm going to be very honest. I have not passed out a study guide for the last 3 years because these notes are their study guide. Now granted, I don't know what the right word is. They have to take Cornell Notes in my class and I grade their Cornell Notes and all that kind of stuff. So there's a different level of them using them in my class, which is why I'm confident in not passing out a study guide. But theoretically, your students have all that information in front of them and so they can say, I don't know what to study for that test. But you're like, oh, let's look at your notes from class. And then refer to their little skinny column questions and be like, okay, why don't we write some questions to go with this information? And we'll see how that goes, okay? And it kicks them back into the driver's seat of what it is like, oh wait, I know this. Like it gives them that confidence, especially if you have a student who panics. Like that moment where they're like, oh, I have a test, the sweaty palms, the no sleep, tears usually involved, something. And you're like, oh, wait. You have been doing this for 2 weeks. You are smart. You can handle it, right? And so it's just kind of talks them off the ledge a little bit. It's always good. Here's the other part. This is the part, info that they don't understand. That's okay to write that in that skinny column. And then it's that follow-up with the teacher on the back end. So how many times have we had conversations where have you talked to the teacher? Have you asked a question in class? Have you talked to the teacher? Like, I don't know. I feel like a broken record with a middle schooler saying, hey, did you ask a question in that class? This gives them their crutch. Be like, okay, as you're going through your notes, you don't understand this? Awesome. Let's write it down. And then you can just physically take that piece of paper and stand in front of the teacher and read that question if that's your nervous moment, It provides them that safeguard, so to speak. Hi guys, are you taking care of handouts for me? Awesome. All right, so those are those. Any gaps in your notes can also be identified there. Now, with this type of information, if I had written this in my notes, this is what I would write for a skinny column question. What type of question should I write? So again, we try to coach the students through how do you decide what to write for a skinny column question. So this is just an example of a activity we would do with our students to show them how to start writing skinny column questions. Because ideally, phrasing the question so that it helps you recall the information on the right. Now I just want us to pause for a moment and think about this high level of processing that this does for the student. Like the what's demanded of their brain to make this work. They are reviewing that information, they're looking through and trying to analyze it, they're pulling out things, they're having to articulate and use vocab that they're using in class. So all these different methods, we're talking about at this point, just with writing skinny column questions and the revisions I've talked about, they will have already had 7 different revisions of their information. From the time they received it for the first time in class until this point, 7 different revisions. That's huge. Just to practice the information that much. And that's why, no matter how much they hate it, they're not going to. Because as an adult sitting in front of the classroom going, woohoo, we're going to know this information, for sure. But not just the information, they have the process that's backing up their confidence of learning.
So do you, the writing versus doing it on the computer, is there a big difference in retention?
No. Not at this
Because,
point.
learning styles, sometimes they say you remember if you...
Correct. And I think it does depend on the student. And that's where I will never blanket statement say every child should write their Cornell Notes. Right now, every 6th grader should be writing Cornell Notes on a piece of paper. Because their cognitive sorting is not there to put it on a computer screen and for that to translate for them. But I see very, very successful 8th and 9th graders right now personally who are taking all electronic notes and kicking butt.
For the previous class, they really were focusing on the writing of what writing does for them to retain it.
Yes, and there is that component as well. And that's where I think we walk that balance of what is the purpose of note-taking for the students. If it's to take that information, assimilate it into what they need to remember, then I don't think there's a difference between electronic or written. If it's for communication practice and for clarification of understanding, then the writing component is going to be necessary. And that's where you kind of have to feel out too with if your child is just typing it in and then again still walking away from it even though they can still make it pretty. I did have one avid student last year who her notes looked amazing. Like I would go and grade her notes every week and I was like, wow, look at all the highlighting and You got links in here and you got everything. She was sitting in class doing that at the same time. Well, that's not a repetition. She's sitting there taking awesome notes and filling them out as they're happening. Well, your brain's not doing it again and again and again. You're doing it awesome right there in that 5 minutes. So that's the idea too, when the child's like, yeah, I took great notes, and they open it up and it's all like beautiful, and you're like, wait, you just took those notes today? What? They shouldn't look that beautiful yet. They should look pretty boring at this point. Now they should look beautiful like in 24 hours. You know, and so it is, again, it's teaching the process to get them there. And that's why, again, on paper, it's awesome to say, switch writing utensils. But I've got some awesome gel pen users who can switch on the fly. I have some who've mastered out 2 pens in their hand at one time. Like, what are you doing? Well, I'm highlighting as I take notes. No highlighting while you take notes. Just take notes. So. Now, there's summaries that go at the bottom. And these are nicer for you, obviously. This summary that's down here should ultimately answer their essential question. Okay? And so that is talking to you about the difference between a summary and a reflection. It's not a reflection of what they learned or what they did in class. It's a summary of this information and how it applies to the essential question. Because ultimately, as the lesson proceeds, you do have that target you're trying to get them to. You know, in all of our standards-based moments that we're living right now with standardized testing, and ultimately we're trying to get them to retain specific pieces of information. So at the end, their summary should answer what they started with at the top. Okay? And again, summaries are going to require, some teachers love them, totally use summaries as the warm-up the next time in class. They'll have their students pull out their notes, be like, okay, get out your notes from last class, write your summaries. And so it forces that, it's 48 hours later, but it forces that repetition in a timely manner for them to sit down and do a summary again. And so that's a nice component, but not all the teachers are doing that. You know, some teachers will assign that as their homework. Write your summaries for your Cornell Notes. I totally can. Are there any questions so far? I think you guys have been doing a great job of asking as you have them. Do I get to use you as an example, Dulce? Okay, good. Dulce is in my Avid class, so I love it that you're here. All right. So far, essential question, the main part of the notes, skinny columns, summaries.
Just a question.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you told us that there is Cornell Note paper. So there is paper like that we can buy, but where?
I have seen it at Office Depot.
Oh.
Office Depot. And if you ask them for it, even if they don't have it in store, they can order it for you. They'll know. They can look it up. It's out there. We've actually, we had a rep show us and are entertaining the option of providing that as a purchasing option. We're trying to figure that out through school, because I'm like, how great is that? We just had a whole notebook or a loose leaf, a ream of Cornell note paper. Yay! Be my private victory. I know, I get excited about weird things, but it's okay. All right, so again, answering each question to compose your summary. That's where these skinny column questions can also come into handy. Help if they're, especially you guys, this is a writing component. If they're having a hard time composing a paragraph about what it was they learned about that information, they can use each of those skinny column questions as a prompt for a sentence. So all those questions are answering the EQ, but that way it kind of helps them write that summary and then they can answer them. Right, Dulce, isn't that what you do too?
Yeah.
When you write your summaries, that's a huge help, isn't it?
Yes.
Can you give a little spiel about what you like most about Cornell Notes up to this point? Like what you like most about the taking and the revision part? I know I'm totally putting you on the spot.
What I like about taking Cornell Notes is that I get to interact with them, and the essential question, I could go back to my notes, and then on summary I get to specify my answer and summary.
Yeah, like you clarify that you
Yeah.
truly understand that information, and that feels good.
Yes.
Yay! See, this is why we do it. Okay, I could have so gone. No, I'm kidding. Okay, then the fold-over method. I don't know if I have another slide about the fold-over method. Yeah, using your notes to study. So when I am grading students on their notes, we talk about seeing a crease in their paper, which is tricky for me because I'm like, oh no, I need everything like smooth and nice and no, fold that baby over and crease it. So we encourage this from students, okay? Because if they're truly using them as a study tool, they are mutilating them in the sense of being able to look at them. Now, if you notice, when it's copied back to back, do you notice what else pops up in the front? The other two questions that were on the back side. So they're sitting here looking at a sample test question bank that they can then review with each other. And then this is, again, provide them that social opportunity where you're like, hey, sit and go over your questions with each other. And as a teacher, of course I do. Are you kidding? I'm giving them an excuse to talk. And what's awesome is when they have those questions in front of them, they can talk about that. Not about this next week, which is going to be so much fun. Not seeing your teachers for a whole week. So, that is one of the, so again, it's directed. I know. I have a middle schooler. I'm living through it with you, babe. I totally get it. But it's the idea of being able to do this, even if they're like, no, I totally revised my notes. Look at how great this is. Be like, oh, cool, give them to me. Be like, okay, question 1. What is the significance of the speaker in the poem? And then what's great, you don't have to know the answer. You just open it up and be like, there's my answer. Woo! So, again, right? Because how many times do we help with geometry, you're like, I have no idea. I haven't done theorems for like 20 years. I don't know what I'm doing with postulates or whatever. And you're like, oh, wait, I have a cheat sheet. I don't have to
The answer
know.
makes sense.
Exactly. Exactly. Be like, okay, keep talking. Yep, those words are all being good. Check. Now, on a computer, I have seen students create a text box that they blank out that lives over here on their screen, and then when they go to review, they drag the text box to cover up their notes. So then it's still creating that blanked out moment, so they can't see the rest of their notes and they're still quizzing themselves with their skinny column. So again, it's still an interaction moment and it can still be totally dependent on what the child needs. Yes?
So, I'm sorry, I came late. So
No, it's
I
okay.
missed the beginning, but, so they can do this on the computer. I have a 6th grader, so they can take the notes this way?
They can take
Because
the...
he brought this home, the notebook from math. And
Yes.
I was trying to erase it. I said, no, Mom, this is Cornell Notes, you know. I said, what is this? Why are you marking all this? He said, the teacher told me to take this. So that was the only thing that I checked, the math. But
Yeah.
they can take on their computer Cornell Notes?
They can take Cornell Notes for 6th grade. I would wait to encourage that for a little bit longer until they
Okay.
get used to the format.
Okay, so all the teachers are doing this?
A lot, 6th grade, yes. Yes.
Okay, because
We're-
I didn't, I don't know. I saw he's graded for a notebook take, notes taken. I said, what is this? And he didn't know how to explain that. And I said, you got a grade for notes taken? I mean, are you, kidding? And he didn't know how to explain. So the teachers are grading them on this?
Yes, so there are some teachers who will grade their summaries. Like I treat their summaries as an exit ticket, as a checkpoint for me, a formative assessment. Because if they can write a really good summary about what it is we're supposed to be learning, check, awesome, they're good. There are some teachers who totally do grade as a formative, their questions that are here, because then as a teacher I can also be like, oh wait a second, they don't understand this concept yet, so I need to go over that some more. Like, so there is that happening within your classes too.
Okay.
But yeah, we will look, I know science, all of our 6th grade science classes, 7, all of our science classes.
He told me not to come tonight because he knows how to take these notes. I said, I don't, so I need to come tonight.
I'm so glad you're here, perfect.
He said, no, Mom, I know how to take the notes. I said, I have to learn.
Yes, and does it make sense now why they would
Because
be
he had all
graded?
these lines. I said, what is this, mathematics with all these
Yeah. But now seeing the repetitions and why we're using it as a learning tool, it makes it so much easier to understand. Sure, we do grade the notes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no,
I'm glad I came.
that's good.
I just
That's good.
don't see how you could really apply math to this.
I know.
No, it's.
Well, he had
Well, they have an example,
page,
but I thought
like
the
the
same thing.
properties in the
Oh,
left
there
side
is an
with the
example.
page
Math
and
at the end of the day, you
book, and then the answer and the examples.
Yeah.
So, and
I
he
didn't
know,
know
I
that.
said, why you have to go to that page? And he said, Mom, because the property in mathematics is this at this page, and here is the example.
Yes.
So I
I
didn't know.
Yeah. So it is laying out, so with math, okay, so my ninth graders have, you have geometry, right? Chelsea?
No, algebra.
Algebra. So in algebra though, when you're taking your Cornell notes, can you explain to everybody how you use it with your math class? How you use your notes? Because don't you get them already framed? Do they come to you already framed? No. Geometry comes to you already framed. Our geometry classes, they already get their framework for their notes in a Cornell style as well.
When did they start doing that?
Last year was for all of the ninth grade class, all the ninth grade geometry classes. So they come that way. But can you tell a little bit about how you're using, like what you do for your math notes?
Well, we don't get Cornell notes, but I usually put them in Cornell notes.
Yeah.
What I do is I put the easy ones and then the hard ones, and then I kind of put hard ones and then the questions about the hard ones.
About the hard ones.
And when I try to figure them out, I just put questions and ask the teacher, and if he gives me the answer, then I write it down.
There you go. So so in the learning tool concept is that she's going through and writing down the information that the teacher is sharing out, but then as you go to do your sample problems or to do your homework that night, and you're going through and reviewing those concepts. I also have students, we talked about pulling out like the vocab or the concept that's being tested, because I think so many times for math we forget for the students to, we're so worried about them solving the problems that they forget to review the vocab that goes with those problems, and then they're sitting there at the test and they're like, I have no idea what a limited expression means. And it just told me I'm supposed to do this with limited expressions. And that's 5 problems. And I don't know what I'm doing. You know, so there's that component as well. And I love, Dulce is really good about writing also in that skinny column the question that she needs to get answered. So she might have done all these problems, she wrote down all the samples, they look great, but she's like, wow, I really don't know how to find X at this point. So, but yes, our geometry classes with all of our flipped classrooms, so they do flipped learning with our geometry classes where they watch the videos at home and take notes. All those are set up Cornell style. So the students are supposed to come back to class with those filled in, and then the teacher supplements those the next day, and they add more to them as they go through and do their skinny columns and their summaries in class instead, which is awesome. So, all right, I think. All right, so overall, just to reflect for us, we've got note taking, which was the notes in class, making the notes usable for home, studying with your notes. There is another component that we're developing, is the note reflection piece, where with the grading, they're getting feedback on those notes as a learning tool. And then having the students be able to say, wow, look at my test scores when I used my Cornell Notes, really used my Cornell Notes, and look at my test scores when I didn't. And being able to have them process that idea of going, oh, this is why even though I don't like them, I should do it. So that is my spiel for you guys. Are there any questions? Okay, I'm going to do fist to 5 just like I do with my kids. 5 was super helpful, totally know where I'm going with this at home. Fist being, wow, I can't believe I sat through you talking this whole time.
I don't know. Thank you. So I got to erase these lines there because I thought, well, you don't even use a ruler. What are you doing? Left side, right side. Mom, you don't know.
I didn't even know this existed.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen this
I have a
yet.
ninth grader who has never told me this.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a boy, thank you.
There's a boy.
It's never ever the same.
The boy.
I asked
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, ask to see them.
I
They're,
will.
yeah, mhm.
Nice.
And when they have those naked skinny columns, be like, wow, what are you supposed to do with those? Because I know what Mr. Carlson and Ms. Griffiths are telling them to do with those. Yeah, because we have those conversations. So can I see fist to 5, like how helpful this was for you guys? Can you give me a rating where you're at?
Right.
Awesome, 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 awesome. Thank you, you guys. That was awesome feedback. And anytime, you are more than welcome to, contact any of us and we will gladly support you with whatever questions you have about Cornell Notes. And if you want to ever come hang out in my class, you're more than welcome. It's quite a, I teach, so on A days, I teach a 1, 2, and a 3, 4 block. that's the Avid class, but we do all these kind of strategies all the time. More than welcome.
Okay.
Join the party.
So when they make their notes usable, you're not
Parents?
copying them, you're using that empty space that you had? Is
Correct.
that-
Using
okay.
that empty space and filling in with multiple colors and, yeah, highlighting. Explanation points. Yes, ma'am.
So basically, during a class, they just use a notebook.
Mhm.
And after, at home,
Thank you.
they fill the question
Yes.
and
Write the summary.
write the summary.
And then make them look pretty.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they're not supposed
No,
to recopy those notes then, right?
No.
No.
Now, if any of us are dealing with perfectionists, I also have dealt with that too, where you have a student who comes home and you're like, no, I need to recopy these before I can revise them. You have to pick your battle, obviously, but I always encourage them that if they're truly leaving enough white space, they should never have to recopy them. They should be able to just embellish and use and cross off and be okay with it being crossed off. Like sometimes that's a complete growth moment for them as well.
Me, so I'd be like, can you rewrite this?
I know.
Start over?
I know. You're like, no.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you guys for coming. Appreciate it, and I hope this was
Oh, yeah.
powerful.
Excited.
Now, before you all leave, you have to drink 2 cups of juice and eat a handful of
Get a
cookies.
birdie here.
I know.
Have some
Because
juice.
that's how much is out.
You would have had more people had they known you had free.
You want me to stop? Miss? Miss, do you want
They
me
have
to
no
stop
idea what
here?
they missed out on, right?
You have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, sir. Do you want me to stop recording here?
Please, thank you, sweetie.
If I figure out how to stop this,